Deep in the forested ridges of northern Idaho, I had built what I thought was my dream retreat, a log cabin overlooking a private lake, surrounded by silence, pines, and the occasional moose. I bought the land outright 3 years ago, after 20 years of service with the U.S. Marshals. It was my retirement gift to myself, a quiet life, far from the noise, rules, and chaos of the city. The property sat at the end of a long dirt road, miles away from any homeowners association or nosy neighbor. Or so I thought. My wife, Claire, loved it too. She spent her mornings painting by the window, and her evenings curled up by the fire. We both liked the simplicity. No rules, no committees, no permits needed to breathe. Just us, the wilderness, and a cabin we built with our own hands. But trouble has a way of finding peace, especially when it thinks it can profit from it. It began on a quiet Friday afternoon. A black SUV rolled slowly up the dirt road, kicking dust over the mailbox. I noticed it from my office window and thought maybe it was a delivery truck. We weren't expecting anyone, but up here, that wasn't unusual. Claire was on the porch, pruning her plants, when the vehicle stopped right at the end of our drive. 2 people stepped out, both in matching dark polo shirts that read Lakeview Property Compliance Division. The words looked official, but something about them was off. No government insignia, no real badge, just shiny clip-ons and confidence. They walked up to Claire like they owned the place. From where I stood inside, I could tell something was wrong by her posture, the way she stepped back, the way her shoulders stiffened. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the hand gestures, the pointing, the finger waving. After a few minutes, Claire came inside, pale and confused. She said they claimed to be community officers from a local HOA enforcement unit, accusing us of violating neighborhood appearance codes. According to them, our unregistered structure, meaning the cabin, was non-compliant. There was no HOA here. None. I went out to talk to them, but before I reached the porch, they had already driven off. No ticket, no paperwork, just a smug promise that they'd be back. I didn't think much of it until the next day, when I found a bright orange paper stapled to our gate. Notice of immediate action. Property subject TO, compliance review. It looked like something printed at home, but the language was serious. Fines, citations, threats of forced inspection. I tried calling the county, but they had no record of any enforcement body under that name. When I asked if there was a Lakeview Property Association, the clerk said flatly, "Sir, there is no HOA in that area." That's when it hit me. Whoever those people were, they weren't officials. They were pretending. Over the next few days, they returned. They'd park nearby, taking photos from a tree line. Once I caught them snooping around the boat shed. Claire was scared, and I couldn't blame her. So I decided to handle it my way. Quietly, methodically. I started documenting everything. Their license plate, faces, timestamps. Old habits die hard. Years of law enforcement instincts told me this wasn't about property. It was about intimidation. Someone wanted control, or maybe the land itself. By the 5th day, they escalated. That afternoon, I was out on a supply run, and Claire stayed behind. When I got back, her car door was open, and she was standing on the porch, trembling. 2 men, the same fake officers, had tried to handcuff her. They told her she was under arrest for noncompliance. They didn't know who they were dealing with. As I stepped out of my truck, my old badge caught the light in the glove box, a reminder of what I once commanded and what I still could. Because they hadn't just crossed the wrong man. They'd crossed a U.S. Marshal. The air was thick that evening, a mix of mountain dust and tension. Claire sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her coffee. Her wrists still showed faint red marks where one of the fake officers had grabbed her. I had seen a lot of my time with the Marshals, fugitives, scams, identity thieves, but never anything this brazen. Pretending to be law enforcement to extort homeowners? That was a new low. I kept calm, because that's what I was trained to do. But inside, I was seething. These people thought they could play cop in the woods. They thought they could intimidate my wife, trespass on my property, and walk away unscathed. That night, I reviewed everything I had collected so far. Photos, videos, timestamps. The black SUV had out-of-state plates, Nevada. The 2 men, mid-40s, both with tactical belts and earpieces that looked official, but were actually low-grade replicas. The woman who sometimes came with them carried a clipboard and wore mirrored sunglasses like a movie extra. They were good at looking legitimate, just not too closely. I called a few friends from my old team, men I trusted. They didn't need much explanation. I told them to hold off for now, but I wanted background checks run quietly. Within 24 hours, I had a lead. The so-called Lakeview Property Compliance Division was not a real organization. It was a shell name linked to a private land flipping company that had been quietly targeting rural homeowners. Their trick was simple: intimidate people into compliance fines, threaten legal trouble, and then offer to buy out the property to settle the issue. Most folks, scared of the legal jargon, just sold and left. But this time, they'd targeted the wrong cabin. The next morning, I saw the SUV again, parked halfway down the road. I decided to let them come. Claire wanted to call the sheriff, but I told her I'd handle it. I wasn't planning to get violent, but I was done playing defense. Around noon, the two men approached again. They had new badges, now in shiny leather holders, and printed official paperwork they tried to hand through the gate. I didn't open it. I just recorded everything from my phone. When they realized I wasn't intimidated, their tone shifted. The taller one leaned closer to the fence, pretending authority he didn't have, and said they'd be back with backup. Backup. They left again, but this time, not before posting a second notice. This one warning of lawful removal of unregistered structures. It was all nonsense, but it was escalating. That night, I moved our trail cameras and drones into position. If they came again, I have everything. My instincts told me they wouldn't stop. Bullies like this never do until they're made to. 2 days later, I got the proof I needed. The SUV returned at dawn, and this time, they brought 2 more vehicles. I watched from the upstairs window as 6 people spread out across the property, all wearing the same fake uniforms, one even carrying handcuffs. They didn't know I had surveillance on every inch of the cabin. They filmed themselves walking around, knocking on doors, pretending to issue citations, like they were building a case. Then, one of them tried the back door. That was it. I called the local sheriff's office. Not because I needed help, but because I wanted witnesses. When deputies arrived, the fake HOA cops tried to bluff their way through with jargon and half-fake IDs. It didn't last long. Within minutes, they were stuttering, tripping over their own lies. The deputies detained them temporarily, but without verified federal charges, they couldn't hold them long. Still, I had what I needed: full footage, names, and proof of impersonation. When the imposters were released, I knew they'd come back angry. That's how people like this operate. Too dumb to back down, too arrogant to quit. But this time, I wasn't going to wait for them. I made a few calls, not to the sheriff, not to lawyers, but to Washington. And the moment I said my name and the word Marshal Command, everything started moving fast. Because if those fake cops wanted to play authority, they were about to meet the real thing. The next 48 hours were quiet, too quiet. The fake HOA crew had vanished, at least on the surface. But I learned long ago that silence didn't mean safety. It meant planning, and I knew they weren't done. Claire tried to go about her routine, making coffee, painting by the window, but her eyes kept drifting toward the tree-line. The calm we once loved now felt like a curtain hiding something darker. I spent the time gathering every piece of evidence I had: photos, video stills, the fake notices, even the sound of their engines idling near the property. I organized it like a case file, just as I'd done hundreds of times before. Then, I sent it through a secure channel to my former unit. The U.S. Marshal Service doesn't normally intervene in small property disputes. But impersonating law enforcement is a federal crime, and once the digital forensics team confirmed the group's identity, it escalated quickly. These weren't just opportunists. They were part of a larger network that had been operating across multiple states, using intimidation, fraud, and fake citations to coerce landowners. Within hours, I was back in official contact with my former command, not as an agent, but as a consultant. They gave me authorization to coordinate with the local field office. The case got a name: Operation Cabin Line. We set the trap carefully. I left the compliance notice, taped to the front gate, untouched. I wanted them to think we were rattled, maybe even preparing to leave. Claire stayed with a friend in town for safety. I stayed behind, bait, camera, and witness all in one. On the third night, just past midnight, I saw headlights moving slowly down the road. The same black SUV, followed by a second one. Through my scope, I could see 3 men in tactical vests. One carried what looked like zip ties. Another had a clipboard again. The same fake paperwork. They parked at the end of the drive, whispering to each other, unaware that thermal imaging from a drone overhead was streaming live to the Marshal's mobile command post 5 miles away. Every step they took was being recorded, every word captured by hidden microphones along the fence line. They broke the gate lock and entered the property, flashlights slicing through the dark. They moved with the arrogance of men who thought no one could touch them. One walked up the porch steps and started pounding on the door. That was the signal. A few seconds later, floodlights snapped on across the clearing, bright as day. The sound of engines roared from the tree-line as unmarked SUVs surged forward, tires crushing gravel. Red and blue lights burst through the forest. The fake HOA cops froze. For a moment, they tried to run, but it was pointless. The marshals moved fast, emerging from both flanks, shouting clear commands. Within 30 seconds, it was over. The imposters were on the ground, restrained, faces pale under the blinding light. From inside the cabin, I stepped out slowly, my badge in hand. One of the marshals nodded at me as they began reading rights. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. In the following hours, the scene became a coordinated operation. Evidence was cataloged, hard drives seized, and vehicles impounded. The regional director himself arrived by dawn to oversee the transfer. Turns out, these individuals were tied to multiple open cases, everything from property fraud to organized impersonation. By sunrise, the forest was quiet again, but the peace felt different this time, like justice had reclaimed the air. When Claire returned that afternoon, she stopped at the gate, now repaired and secure. She looked around at the stillness and asked if it was really over. I told her it was, at least for us. But even as I said it, I knew the investigation wasn't done. Because the marshals had found files in their vehicles, maps, records, and lists of other rural homeowners across the country. Our case was just the beginning. The investigation that followed spread far beyond my quiet cabin in Idaho. What had started as a small confrontation in the woods turned into one of the largest property fraud takedowns the marshals had seen in years. The suspects arrested that night were only the front line, the enforcers who showed up in SUVs with fake badges. But behind them was something bigger, something that stretched across multiple states and counties. Their Lakeview Property Compliance Division was one of 6 shell names linked to a real estate conglomerate running a scam empire. They used intimidation, fake citations, and doctored legal notices to scare people into settlements or sales. Every dollar they squeezed came from someone who just wanted to live in peace. For weeks, I worked alongside the task force as a consultant, helping identify victims and piecing together the group's movements. My footage became key evidence, time-stamped, high-definition proof of impersonation and trespassing. The suspects' phones, once decrypted, revealed message chains boasting about easy wins and scared homeowners. The story hit the news soon after. Local stations first, then national outlets. They called it the fake HOA sting. Reporters swarmed the area, filming outside the sheriff's office, interviewing frightened homeowners who realized they'd been conned. I tried to keep my distance from the media circus. Claire and I wanted to return to normal life. Quiet mornings, coffee by the lake, the smell of pine and peace. But things had changed. Our cabin was now part of the case file, a location mark on a federal map. One evening, a marshal I'd trained years ago stopped by with an update. He told me the arrests had expanded, 15 people across 4 states, including the so-called director who had created the HOA front. Their records traced to offshore accounts, tax fraud, and dozens of civil violations. What began as a property scam had unraveled into a web of organized crime. Hearing it all, I felt the familiar chill of satisfaction. Not joy, not revenge, but closure. Justice had moved like it always did. Slow, steady, unstoppable. Claire eventually returned to painting. Her first canvas after everything was of the cabin itself. The front porch at sunset, soft light on the wood, calm water behind it. She called it restoration. I didn't need to ask why. Weeks later, I stood at the gate where it all began, where the fake notice once hung. The new sign I installed read simply, "Private property. No trespassing. Protected." It wasn't just a warning, it was a statement. Before the marshals left the area, the regional director shook my hand. He said something I never forgot. Sometimes the best bait for justice is the one who already knows the game. After they cleared out, the forest was silent again. The birds returned, the wind softened, and the water stilled. Peace, the real kind, finally settled in. But every so often when I hear tires on gravel or catch headlights cutting through the trees, I still look up, out of habit, because you never really stop being what you once were. You just change where you aim the badge. And if anyone ever tries to bring trouble back to this cabin, HOA, scammer, or otherwise, they'll learn the same lesson those fake cops did. You can pretend authority all you want, but when the real law shows up, pretending stops.